Well, thanks, Randy. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. And since he told the sunglass story, that explains all of the little laugh lines I have around my eyes. I'm doing a lot of squinting right now. Truly a pleasure to be with you. A little humbled, actually, to be standing in front of you as well, because I'm looking out on people that are the true water experts for the state of Colorado. And I want to let you know that our office in Washington, our offices here in the 3rd Congressional District, are always open to you. We want to have your input. There's nobody who understands Colorado water and the importance of it more than the people in this room. So as you have ideas, as you see issues that are coming up, I hope that you'll take advantage of this invitation to be able to come into our office, to be able to express those concerns, to be able to put forward those ideas, because your input is going to be critically important to us. When we're talking about, optimistically right now, the ski season coming up, that's what we all understand is unique to Colorado. That is our water storage. And fundamentally, I think that we all know in our hearts, in Colorado, we need to do everything we can to achieve more water storage, truly, for this state. It's under my understanding by the year 2050, we're probably going to have about 1 million new residents in Colorado coming in. Every one of them is going to want to take a bath, take a shower, probably be able to maybe grow a little garden, have a yard as well. That's going to require more water in Colorado. We're going to have to pursue common sense conservation, just making sure that we're making good use of the water that we currently have, storing more water in the state of Colorado as well, and applying those principles of just good Colorado common sense to the most valuable resource that we have, because that is the liquid gold of Colorado that we're dealing with. You know, if I may, I'd like to be able just to express a little bit, first-term member of Congress, and I can legitimately look you in the eye and tell you that I've never been a career politician and participated in the process, but went back to Washington, D.C., just as a small business person, as many of you are. And would like to express, because we've had, you may have heard, there are a few challenges going on in Washington right now in terms of some of the issues that we're dealing with. When we had the continuing resolutions that were going on, we had one late night. We were there till like 2:30 in the morning. And I hope this doesn't sound too hokey to you, but it's part of the, I guess the best way to describe it is the intense honor that I feel of having the privilege of representing the 3rd Congressional District and indeed the state of Colorado in our nation's capital. But this one night when we were running late, there was a pause while we were waiting for some legislation to be presented, and had the opportunity to step off the floor and go over into the rotunda of the Capitol. And I looked up and looked around, and I was the only person standing in the rotunda of the Capitol of the United States of America. And I thought, only in this country could a small-town boy from Cortez, Colorado, have an opportunity to be able to serve and to represent his district and his state and stand in this nation's capital. And I want to thank you all for that opportunity. It is a tremendous privilege and one that I do not take lightly. So, you know, one of the issues I think that it is truly important that we all recognize, because it's going to impact some of the issues that we're going to be talking about when we're talking about water storage, when we're talking about where do we go from here, truly as a state and as a nation. We have some real economic challenges that we're facing in this country right now. Numbers that you're probably, unfortunately, all too familiar with. Have $14.3 trillion of debt in this nation. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a small business guy. And I have a tough time just getting my arms around what's $1 million, let alone $1 billion, and now we're talking trillions of dollars of debt in this country. Well, I'd like to give you this example just to understand a little bit about what $1 trillion truly is. If you're a basketball fan, maybe you paid a little attention at the beginning of this last season in January. There's this great competition to see who is going to land the services of LeBron James to be able to play basketball for them. Was he going to stay in Cleveland? Was he going to go to New York? Ultimately, he landed down in Miami, playing for the Miami Heat. One of the best basketball players in the country. He's going to be paid the princely sum of $40 million a year to be able to play basketball. $40 million a year. Now, if you're like me, you probably get on your knees every night and you look up to the Lord and say, why can't I dribble a basketball? Well, it's not to be, at least for me. But if LeBron James wants to earn just $1 trillion, we need to wish him very good health, because he will have to play basketball for 25,000 years at $40 million a year to add up to just $1 trillion. That's the scope of what we are facing in Washington. We know the impacts that we're seeing at our state. You know, I visited with Randy. I visited with a number of our state legislators. And Randy, thank you so much for introducing me. I'll tell you, he is one of the hardest working people in the Colorado State Legislature. If you get there at 7 o'clock in the morning, you'll meet Randy coming down the hallway with a cup of coffee in his hand. If you're there late at night, he is still there, fully dedicated to standing up for the issues of rural Colorado, the issues that we are truly facing. But our state faces many of those same economic challenges. But I'm looking people in the eye right now that in our families, we're facing those same economic challenges as well. How are we going to be able to balance that family budget? I got the cheap grade. I've just paid $3.58 a gallon to be able to fill up my gas tank. That's been stripping away resources with higher fuel prices for Americans, money that they used to be able to apply to a mortgage, to be able to apply to their future, to be able to build something for their family. I'm paying higher utility bills at home, and I know you are as well, making it tougher for us to be able to make ends meet. But we do it. We do it with the checkbox books in our hip pocket. We're doing it in our businesses, and the state of Colorado does it. And I hope you join with me in believing it is about time that Washington, D.C. abide by the same rules. We be responsible with the taxpayers' dollars, and we balance the budget in Washington, D.C. You know, today I'd like to take a little opportunity just to provide you with a little bit of a legislative update on a couple of items that I am working on during this session of Congress that will impact some of Colorado's water. During this session, our focus in the House and Natural Resources Committee that I serve on, it's remained on creating jobs, being able to get our people back to work, because when we're talking about enhancing revenues back to Washington to be able to supply some of those needs for dollars, let's get people back to work in this country. I just left Mesa County about 2 hours ago, 10.5% unemployment, and that's just the official unemployment that is sitting there. Throughout the 3rd Congressional District, we have better than double-digit unemployment officially in the majority of the counties of the 3rd Congressional District of Colorado, probably into the high teens when we get into the real numbers of the underemployed and those who have simply given up looking for work. We have to be able to get America, the 3rd Congressional District, the state of Colorado, back to work. And that's been a lot of our focus in terms of some of the issues that we're facing and dealing with in terms of the Energy Committee. I believe that getting people back to work, I believe that this is best done through an all-of-the-above energy policy when we're looking at the 3rd. That's going to be one of our primary areas of being able to get people back to work. This approach is going to include both proven and alternative energy technologies as well. A critical piece of this energy strategy that is especially relevant here today at this Water Congress is the production of proven clean hydroelectric power. Hydropower is the cheapest and cleanest source of electricity available through modern technology. It's the highest source of non-carbon emitting energy in the world today and accounts for approximately 75% of the United States' total renewable energy electricity generation. And it's making it the leading renewable energy source of power truly in this country. We have some opportunities to be able to develop that further. Nearly 37% of Colorado's renewable energy is hydroelectric power, but only 33.7% of all of Colorado's energy power is hydroelectric power. We have a significant opportunity in this state to follow the lead of many of our western neighbors in expanding this clean energy alternative of a renewable source of power for our country and for our state, creating badly needed jobs in this district as well, particularly, again, for the 3rd Congressional. However, as it stands, no major electric hydro-powered facilities have been built in many years. Existing facilities are being drained by endless litigation, regulatory obstacles that we're facing that stifle production and lead to increased electricity prices and storage shortages in many regions of the country. I'm currently working on legislation in the Congress. We're calling it our RIS, Regulatory Impact Statement. Let me see if this makes sense to you. I think it's some good Colorado common sense that needs to be applied in Washington, D.C. One of the great challenges that we have is Congress creates an overarching piece of legislation, and then it's left up to the bureaucracy to be able to fill in those blanks, to be able to write those regulations. Well, once we get down the road, we see compounding regulations. We heard testimony this morning during a subcommittee hearing down in Grand Junction of conflicting regulations from different departments with no streamlining of those regulations. New regulations are coming on board. In fact, 2,200 new regulations since 2009 are being proposed and going to have real impact in terms of our ability to be able to create jobs and to be able to achieve results. Does it make sense to you that before those regulations go active, with the full knowledge that the only reason an agency exists is through the authority that was granted to it by Congress, would it be appropriate for those regulatory agencies, before regulations go active, to bring them back to that authoritative body, to the Committee of Resource, for review, for comment, and for approval? To me, that makes sense. Because the problem that we truly face with a lot of the regulations which are inhibiting job growth and getting this economy moving once again in this country is, if you want to remove a regulation, it has not been voted on by Congress. But that regulation has the impact of law. Because if you want to be able to remove it, it literally takes the proverbial act of Congress to be able to pull that back. You have to write a piece of legislation, take it through both houses, and then have the president sign it. So I think that's some good common sense legislation that we can work on that's going to streamline the process and make the system truly work for the American people. In March, on the Water and Power Subcommittee that I sit on, we held an oversight hearing to examine federal regulations that are blocking job growth and abundant water and power supplies. As a part of this discussion, we looked at the potential future regulatory obstacles to water deliveries and hydropower generation that will further compound economic hardships in rural communities. It was made abundantly clear during those hearings that regulation and litigation are stifling hydropower production in this country, significantly impacting electricity prices and passing those costs on to the consumers who, I don't need to remind you, are already stressed. Today, federal power customers pay hundreds of millions of dollars in indirect and direct costs associated with judicial interpretations and with federal regulations. I'm working on the Water and Power Subcommittee to be able to find ways to repeal those bureaucratic regulations and to open up those opportunities to expand responsible production of clean and sustainable hydropower. By promoting efforts from smaller sources while maintaining our existing hydropower infrastructure, we can utilize thousands of miles of pipelines, canals, and ditches across the western United States to be able to generate clean, cheap, and sustainable hydroelectric power. Earlier this year, I co-sponsored the Small-Scale Hydropower Enhancement Act of 2011 with Representative Adrian Smith out of Nebraska. This legislation has costly regulatory hurdles, addresses and eliminates costly regulatory hurdles, which render small-scale hydroelectric power projects on non-federal conduits and make them unfeasible. We're going to create those opportunities to make those feasible. This will open the door to increase power and production while decreasing seemingly endless legal fees and streamlining the bureaucratic approval processes. I'm co-sponsoring this legislation because I support this common sense effort to increase renewable energy, increase that production to help create jobs right here in rural America. I look forward to working with all of my colleagues, because when it gets down to water, this isn't a Republican issue. This is not a Democrat issue. This is an issue for all of Colorado and an issue truly for all of our country. My colleagues on the Water and Power Subcommittee, I want to be able to work with all of them to take action on regulatory reform that will make hydropower production easier and more efficient while creating those jobs here at home. This session, I've also been exploring measures to ensure that Colorado water remains under our local control. Earlier this year, I met with representatives of the Colorado Water Conservancy District to be able to discuss how this could best be achieved. Based on our conversations, I'm currently examining legislation that will remove the Colorado River through the McGinnis Canyons from current and future evaluation for wild and scenic river inclusions. This would ensure that the Colorado water remains under local control. Chris, you were back at the meeting that we had on that in Washington, D.C. Administration, by removing the threat of restrictive federal management of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, and this water, however, remains adequately protected, which I think is very important for all of us, protected by state and local oversight as well as a significant presence of dealing with species of fish that are listed under the Endangered Species Act. We're able to do that at the local level because I believe I can look every person here in the eye. Nobody cares more about our water, our rivers, our streams, and our quality of life than the people sitting in this room. We need to be able to play that role. And Chris, I greatly appreciate your efforts coming back to Washington, working with us on this. Any potential legislation that we're going to be dealing with will also ensure that the wilderness boundaries do not include or any way implicate the Colorado River by creatively allowing the wilderness boundary to be able to float and to be able to ebb with the flow of the river. I think this is a creative approach to dealing with it. The wilderness boundary will be at the water's edge, whether in flood or in drought or in between. This allows for a clear and obvious boundary while ensuring and protecting the provisions of the Wilderness Act and do not have creating unintended consequences for affecting Colorado's water resources or the responsible use of our state's waters. We have significant opportunities to be able to protect and responsibly develop our precious Colorado water resources while keeping Colorado's water under local control. I will continue to work with Colorado Water Congress, Colorado River Water Conservancy District, and others to be able to ensure that we have clean and a reliable water source for the state of Colorado. You know, I truly believe in my heart Colorado can lead the way with the expertise that we have in this room in terms of dealing with water conservation as we see the growing population of this country. Back in 1960, the census said there were 130 million Americans. The latest census said 313 million Americans, and we continue to grow. The precious water that we have is our lifeblood for this state and for this nation, and I look forward to working with you to preserve it, to make sure that it's used widely, and that we have the resources available to meet the growing demands of our communities. So thank you all for letting me join you here this afternoon. Thank you.